Hey everyone, welcome to the Pawareness Podcast, and thanks for joining me. This podcast is specifically for about educating and raising awareness for animals and rescues and organizations across the United States and world. It really goes a long way towards this mission when our listeners rate, review, and subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, and all of our other podcast platforms. Also, be sure to check us out on our official website at pawareness.org and on social media at TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram at Pawareness_podcast. You can check us out for all of our latest bits and clips of our podcast, as well as Pet of the Week and Pet of the Month. If you're listening and involved with an animal rescue organization or have a story of your own that you want to share, reach out to us at info@pawareness.org and we can get you on the podcast. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Pawareness Podcast. This is the first episode of the year, and I'm excited to be talking with Kerry D'Amato, an executive director with Pet Haven and a feline behavior consultant. And I just want to go ahead. I'm going to pass it over to you. Go ahead and introduce yourself and what it is that you guys do. And I need to know more about this feline behavior consultant as well.
Right. Yeah. So thank you first for having me on. I'm really thrilled to be here and to talk about what we do and talk about felines. We do help dogs too. But my name is Kerry D'Amato, Executive Director of Pet Haven. We are Minnesota's oldest and first foster-based rescue, established in 1952. And I'm also a feline behavior consultant, and my specialty is cats. I love cats that don't want to use the litter box, and I like to help them refine their place. And then also feline feng shui. So I specialize in reducing conflict in multi-cat households.
And I know you were kind of talking about this before the call, but in terms of just the actual, cats having issues with the litter box and how that's such a problem with euthanasia and cats getting put down. Can you go into that a little bit more? I'm curious because I've personally grew up with cats that had this issue, and then it's just it's a sad thing just to see, struggle with it.
It is sad. We found that we have a really strong owner surrender department. We offer crisis owner surrender services, and we find that a majority of these cats often are being surrendered for unwanted litter box issues. And I say unwanted instead of inappropriate because given the circumstances, it might be appropriate for what the cat is doing. And that's what I try to figure out. I try to figure out, is it a medical situation? And a lot of times it is, and it gets missed by veterinarians, not because they're not the professionals in the field, but there's so many nuances with cats. And if you're not cat specific, you can often miss these little cues that they're giving you. So first we go through medical, then we go through behavioral and environment, what's happening in the environment. And most of the time, I would say when I look through our numbers over the last 2 years, about over 98% of them can be corrected, which is really amazing. And these are cats that would enter into a shelter environment, and they would most likely be euthanized because they were not using the litter box. And so I'm really excited about the work that we're doing to help these cats find placement, stay in their homes, and correct their bathroom issues.
Yeah, and I want to get into some of those cues because I know that you mentioned a few of those, but before I do that, to kind of take a step back, you mentioned these cat surrender services. I know you guys are in Minnesota, and you said that you mainly specialize locally.
Yes.
What if someone's listening in? I'm from Illinois, right? And how does one get in touch or find these cat surrender services in their area? Is that a common thing? Like how would that work?
Well, many shelters and some rescues offer owner surrender services. And so it would be just a matter of reaching out to your local rescues and shelters to see if they offer them. Part of the challenge is most will not take cats or dogs with behavioral issues. At Pet Haven, we kind of have stepped into this as a little bit of a niche. We will take risks on pets because we believe that many of them can be corrected, whether it's through behavioral rehabilitation, which we have a very strong behavioral rehabilitation program, or if it's behavior modification, such as with some of these cats that are not using their litter boxes, or if it's medical situations. We tend to take a little bit more risks than other rescues do, and that's where we position ourselves. And then we work locally mostly because what we were finding was, and all in good intention, lots of dogs and some cats are being brought up from the South because of the high euthanasia rates to Minnesota, where we have these lower rates. And a life is a life, and we want to save them all. But at Pet Haven, we were starting to find that local dogs and cats were really in crisis because so many of these larger rescues were bringing in dogs and cats in out of state. So we decided to take the mission to focus locally and really sort of dig in and help the problems that are happening here, and help the people the people and pets that really need help in Minnesota and our neighboring states.
And I think that's so awesome that you guys are taking on these, maybe a little bit more integral cases, these animals that need help. And that leads me to the question is one is, how big is your organization, and how many pets or future pets do you take in at one time?
Yeah. So I would call us a small to medium size organization. And with that, last year we took in 819 pets. We adopted out 809 of them. 645 were cats. And we operate on a pretty lean budget. We have, up until mid-year of this year, we operated with 2 paid employees, and the rest were volunteers. We now have doubled our staff. We have 4 paid employees, but we still operate on a really low budget. Our volunteers gift us about, on a conservative side, over $300,000 a year in gifted administrative work and, volunteering in all sorts of different ways. So that's how we really work to keep our costs down. We're super volunteer driven. We run with about, I think this year we're going to be a little bit over $500,000 in our budget. 2 years ago, we were only right around 320,000. So we're really growing. People are starting to support what we're doing. I think, especially with the sort of niche of behavioral rehabilitation and some of this, taking more medical risks and things like that.
Yeah, and I think that it's awesome that people are getting behind that and your budget's growing. And what has that budget been allowed you guys to do? And after that, before I forget, I want to ask too, what it takes, like the process from, the whole, like you guys get a pet to the whole behavioral process.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to talk about that. So as far as our budget, we try to keep it very, administratively and staff very lean. So we can make sure that we're able to put the money where it's needed most. And that is in caring for the pets, emergency medical services, behavior rehabilitation. Those are, high nutrition. And our sort of position and mission is to make sure that pets are family, whether they're our foster pets or they're our own pets. We give them the care that we would a family member. So we make sure that, if a cat or a dog needs a dental, we get them that dental. If they have a lump, we get it biopsied. We test all of our cats for feline leukemia and FIV, not because we don't adopt them if they have it, but because we want to know what their health is and what we need to tell the adopter to look out for and be careful with, because these cats are immune compromised. Same with our dogs. We test them for Lyme's disease and heartworm. We treat them if they have it. We invest in our pets. And we feel really strongly about that investment at Pet Haven, because we feel like we got to walk the walk if we're going to talk the talk. And we want our adopters to adopt our mission of taking care of their pets like family. So we really focus on that. We have over 450 volunteers. Some are fosters, some are administrative volunteers, and some come on and go off and come back on and go off. But like I said, our volunteers drive this organization. We couldn't do what we do without them. So, and then, as far as our building budget, it's been wonderful. I mean, COVID has seen some real tragedies that have been difficult in the animal welfare world. But it's also brought us some successes. And I think some of the successes we've seen is more awareness for our organization, more financial support, people wanting to step in. If they can't support physically, they're giving more. Our donors are giving more. And then this sort of click into behavioral rehabilitation. I think people are starting to realize that there are really good pets out there that just need some extra help. And if we can provide that extra help and teach them how to be, the best gentleman dog in the household that they can be, and make it easier for them to be adopted and stay adopted, that's a program that we and our donors want to invest in. And it's working. Our return rate is extremely low compared to industry standard. And I think part of that is because we really take a lot of time to matchmake our adopters, do pre-adoption support services, and really importantly, those post-adoption support services. When you bring a pet into your home and you're like, what have I gotten myself into? I need some help here. We're there for you. We're there to help. We're there to work you through it. And hopefully, most of the time, it all works out really well, and we create family, which is what we want to do.
Yeah, that's so awesome that you guys you don't just, the dog leaves and then it's sayonara from there. You guys still have that post part, which I think is really important. And when it comes to these animals, dogs or cats that you're seeing with these behavior issues, how much do you think of that as like nature versus nurture? Like, I don't know. What do you think on that?
Right. There is that piece of a dog or a cat that may be psychological, that may be genetic. There may be something within that particular pet that we're just not going to be able to work with. Unfortunately, some of the really extreme aggressive situations we see in dogs and cats cannot be worked with sometimes. And those are situations that are really challenging. But most of the time, we're finding the behaviors that are coming to us are ones that, can be worked with. Sometimes they're actually medical issues. Sometimes pets are in pain and the time hasn't been taken to really sort of investigate what's truly going on holistically for the entire pet, be it maybe they're sick or in pain. Maybe it's environmental stress. Environmental stress is huge. Some animals just are super sensitive and they can't function in certain environments. And if we can identify that and we can help them find an environment where they can be successful, it's a win-win for everybody. And that's what we try to do.
Yeah. And I think, and I like that you touch on so many different components of what maybe causes behavioral issues. And I would think that if you were to break it down into a pie chart, some of that might actually be maybe some mishandling of animals or abuse of animals. And I know that I saw that you dealt with some animal welfare. Like I know that legislation, because I know that that's kind of where, like, when you start digging deep and you start climbing up the ladder, you realize like it all kind of stems from like, okay, what laws are in place and what can people do? And I wanted you to touch on that and kind of talk about that whole process and what were you doing? What was the goal? What was the outcome? And how can people kind of help in their area with local legislation?
Yeah, legislation is huge. I think one of the biggest things is, for the animal welfare community as a whole, is moving pets from ownership, from being owned to actually being independent sentient beings. I mean, that would be one of the biggest shifts, I think, in helping to have stronger protections around our companion animals. Legislatively, it can be very difficult to get more protective laws in place. Minnesota, unfortunately, does not have really strong animal welfare laws. They're getting better. But part of it is also getting the people who are to enforce these laws to buy into why it's important to follow up on a potential, say, neglect call. When they get a call that maybe a dog has been left outside in the cold for way too long. It's important for our law enforcement to look into these calls, because those calls can actually be doorways and gateways into other things that are happening in the home. More than likely, if there are animals that are being abused, there's children being abused, at-risk adults being abused. So it's needs to be taken seriously by our law enforcement and by our legislators, that stronger animal welfare laws don't just protect animals, they actually protect people too. And, that's what we need to get across, is why they're important and how they change the lives of all of us in the community for the better. And so that's some of the work that I've tried to do really throughout my adult life. And there's a lot of really strong organizations in Minnesota that are trying to make those changes too.
That's a really interesting connection. And I mean, it makes sense. It's almost like one of those things that it's almost seems like common sense, but I just never connected the dots of, what else is going on here, right? Like if there's some animals that are being neglected, odds are that's probably not the only thing. So
exactly.
That's really interesting. And what do you see Pet Haven in terms of, it's been around for, what is that, 7 decades? Yeah, 70
years. Yes.
70 years.
Yep.
Congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, we're celebrating our 70th anniversary this year. We started in 1952, and it was a group of progressive animal advocates that a couple of them worked at the municipal pound. And one was a vet, and the others were volunteers at the pound. And they started seeing these just really wonderful pets being euthanized because they were having shelter stress. They were getting aggressive in the kennels. They were fearful. They were, hissing and lashing out. And they decided to do an experiment and start taking these at-risk animals home. And they realized that they completely changed their personality and became adoptable. Fear is a huge factor for animals. You're going to see 2 reactions, fight or flight, just like in humans. So building trust with a pet, many of them come to us fearful. And if we can just take the time to build the trust with them and get them out of that fear brain, we can see an entirely different animal and find that they will be evaluated in a very different way. And that's a lot of the work that we do at Pet Haven, is because they're avoiding the shelter and going into a home, or we're pulling them from shelters, animals that are designated at risk at shelters. We see a huge transformation, and that's so rewarding.
Yeah, I think that has to be so gratifying. It makes it like even just one animal, it's totally worth it. And what would you say to someone who's listening that wants to volunteer, because there's so many places to volunteer? What advice would you give them for maybe if they were to volunteer at somewhere that focuses on behavioral type issues? How does that differ? Like, what does that whole volunteer process look like with you guys? And how does it differ maybe from like a more traditional organization?
Right. For us, if you were going to volunteer to be a foster, we need fosters. I think most foster-based organizations, they need fosters. And for us, we run sort of the gamut on the type of animal you can foster. Again, but we are seeing more and more behavioral challenges, just because that's what's coming into the shelters more. So if you were somebody who wanted to volunteer to, say, foster a dog or a cat that has some behavioral needs, be prepared for work, be prepared for time and patience. Allow the pet to move at their pace. They will communicate with you through body language, through verbal too, and just listen and watch and learn from the pet. Take the time to build that trust. And those pets are going to take longer to get out to be adopted by a family, but it's so incredibly rewarding. We just had one of our cats that had been with us for over a year, and she got adopted right before Christmas. And the foster, it was the most rewarding experience for the foster. She's like, I'm ready. I'll take one that takes 2 years. But it was all trust building. It just took this cat that long to be ready. And the interesting thing is she went into her new family with no problem, just integrated right away. So she learned that people were okay. It was pretty cool.
That is really cool. And I think, yeah, you're right. It definitely takes a longer time because
yes.
The organization that got me into it, Cold Noses, Warm Hearts out here in Santa Barbara, I was a part of fostering, I don't know, like 6 to 8 dogs. And I ended up getting this one dog, and he's the reason why I started the podcast. It took like 6 months, and he was just very distant. But one day, it's about 6 months into it, he just comes up to play, and he did it on his own. So it just takes a little bit longer. Yeah. That's all.
Yeah. We sort of have the 3-3 rule, 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months. And those are sort of milestones where you'll see big behavioral changes. And that 6-month mark, we always say that's when they start feeling like they're home. And that's when they really blossom. So that's exactly what you saw with your little guy.
Yeah, that's so crazy. I never heard that. 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months.
3 months.
And then that's so cool. I've never heard that before.
Yeah, we use that a lot with our fosters. Just hold on,
Right. Like just be patient, especially with you guys, because I mean, the other dogs I had, especially like when you're talking like a little bit younger dogs or like dogs that have no issues, they go pretty quick, especially in the last year or two with more people working from home. But yeah, I mean, where do you guys see, you guys are 70 years old. Like, where do you see the organization going? And like, what's kind of like in the pipeline?
Yeah. So, I really see our crisis owner surrender program being something that just continues to grow. As there are more and more increased pet ownerships, there are going to be more people that find themselves in situations that are unavoidable and they just are unable to care for their pet. I want to be there for them no matter what, no judgment. I want to make sure that pets are safe and that we help people. If we can divert surrender, we have services where we will help people and try to divert surrender. So I know our owner surrender program is going to continue to grow. The other one is our behavioral rehabilitation program. And again, with that, if we can divert it and give services and education to help people, something as simple as leash training. They can't walk their dog on the leash. The leash is going to pull them down and they're going to get hurt. So they want to surrender them. We'll get them in with one of our structured dog walkers and teach them how to properly, their dog to properly walk on a leash. And that can divert surrender. There are things that don't, and we'll take those animals, work with them. So definitely our owner surrender. And then we're looking into, in behavioral rehabilitation. And then we're looking into potentially at emergency vetting grants because I just don't think anyone should have to give up their animal because they can't afford vet care. So looking into possibly moving towards something where we are going to help people keep their pets, people in crisis keeping their pets. I see that being a big area. So, and then our other work, always working with our indigenous nations and our tribal nations. We pull tons of animals off the reservations, helping them. So that's a huge work that we do.
That's really interesting. And it's awesome that you guys are, it's like, you're focusing in your community, but you're still branching outside of it and, getting some of these animals from other areas where maybe euthanasia is higher.
Yes, absolutely. And that's always been sort of Pet Haven's mission, is to help at-risk animals.
Yeah. And Kerry, where can everyone follow you at? Where can they find you guys and follow you, what you guys are doing?
Yeah, great. Well, we have a website, and it's www.pethavenmn, like Minnesota.org. We're also on Instagram, Pet Haven MN. We do have a YouTube channel, and it's Pet Haven MN1. I don't know why it's one, but it's Pet Haven MN1. And we'd love to see you there.
Yeah, and all of that will be in the link in the description below, wherever you guys are listening.
Thank you,
Kerry. I want to thank you so much for coming on. Thank you so much. And
thank you.
It was great talking with you. Awesome first episode of the year. Glad to have you on. And definitely, let's keep in touch. And I'm sure you'll be on in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Rescue on.
Rescue on. All right.
Right.
Awesome.